The best thing about Cambridge is sitting by the mill pond with a bottle of wine in the summer, watching tourists crash their punts.
Hunting on the river is great fun.
We've got a copy of Newton's Treatise on Mathematica. That's about the only thing I can think of. Pink Floyd come from here.
The football rules were invented here, weren't they?
The guys who discovered DNA.
And really good cycle lanes, of course.
We cycled here this evening.
There are people who don't expect the bikes.
The tourists.
They just walk out in front of you.
They complain because you didn't ring your bell.
Yeah.
Or they complain because you did ring your bell.
I love cycling.
There's more to Cambridge than the university.
Especially the cows we have wandering around.
The worst thing about Cambridge is the cyclists without lights.
Oh, blimey.
It's like such first world problems.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you so much and welcome to Mark Steele's in town, which this week comes from famous Cambridge. A city known above all else for not only being pretty and full of clever people, but for never displaying the slightest sense of smugness about it. Because when someone tells you that their daughter's going to Cambridge, it's in exactly the same tone they use for anywhere else, as long as they say, my daughter's going to Peterborough, you know. Now, the main reason that we're doing this programme here is I'm the only person on the BBC who didn't come here in the first place, and they wanted to put that straight. It must be magnificent living here. Every time you get out of the station to come home, you pass 250 students trying to cajole you into a punt before a delightful 3-mile walk into town with a beautiful view of 50,000 tourists all asking each other why the town is so far from the station. And then eventually you can have a scone at Fitzbilly's and look at the gorgeous vista of Chinese people sitting on a wall. You must have loved the peace and quiet of the pandemic, didn't you? Oh, that must actually being able to buy a packet of biscuits. You must have looked out at all those empty streets and thought, oh, bless whoever ate that bat and ran round coughing on people. Because everywhere you look, in any direction, you'll find an amazing marble column or historic courtyard or imposing iron gate behind which someone learnt to rule MI5 or the BBC or ruin the economy or sell the country's secrets to the Soviet Union. Where guides tell crowds of tourists that this was where words were invented or the colour blue was discovered. On your right, you can see the tower of the Holy Sepulchre of the Apple Crumble. Amongst the well-known celebrities who attended Cambridge were Henry VIII's executioner and Emma Thompson. And in all the towns I've been to, I've never been to one where there are so many places where it costs 15 quid to look at something. Is £15 worth it to see a college? I went to Swanley Comprehensive. Maybe they should have charged tourists 15 quid to look round there. With a guide going, and over there are the temporary porter cabins where students have done their science lessons for the last 11 years. But it's not just that here, because there's also the Clifton Road Industrial Estate with a screw fix to keep the working classes happy. It's also the only city where, in the middle, next to the shopping centre, you'll find a field with a cow in it. Because you're the only city in Britain that still has a peasantry. And it's joyous listening to the young students here as they ooze with enthusiasm and passion for the process of learning. Oh, you had to be at the Freshers' Ball. Tickets were £250. Charlie XCX did a duet with Barack Obama. It was awesome. Oh, God, so you go to Girton. Well, that really isn't in Cambridge, is it? I did do a day's work, actually, handing out leaflets for Scudamore punts, so I'm well aware of what it's like to be a manual labourer for the working class. And it's obviously a city that celebrates scientific advance because your main method of transport is to push a boat with a stick. There's the Corpus clock at Corpus Christi College, with no hands or numbers. that says it displays the time with slits arranged in 3 concentric rings depicting hours, minutes and seconds. Oh, you've got to be clever, haven't you? You can't have a clock with hands on like anywhere else. And you're like this with everything. Our buckets don't have a bottom. They keep the water in by whizzing particles of horse dung round at the speed of light. And there's a bridge called the Mathematical Bridge put together in 1749 in such a way that it didn't need any bolts. And there are 2 theories about this. One is from the master of the college, who said it was designed in such a way that it is held together by pure geometry. And the other is from the builders, who said, yeah, sorry, mate, bolts ain't come through. Suppliers let us down. It's all due to Brexit, isn't it? Cambridge, there is more to your fine city than this sort of thing. The trouble is, every time you look up one of these other things, you come across a line like this from one of these books I've got here. The master at St. John's is the only other person in the country, apart from the king, that can legally eat a swan. Because it's full of that here. You get one of these books about the quirks of the city and it says things like, in Trinity College it's legal to use a dwarf as a draining rod. It must be so strange living here. The carol service at King's was on TV. In most places, the carol service is run by Jean from the hairdressers. In normal places, when people go rowing, it's on a pond after a few pints. It's not part of a major historic rivalry with Oxford, analysed all afternoon and presented by Claire Balding. But you're used to this. In Cambridge, if you have a dump, it's on BBC Two and introduced by Stephen Fry. He'd do it, wouldn't he? He would do it. Pish and tish if it didn't go on longer than one anticipated. And there are May balls here that the book Real Cambridge there describes. The lawns become a city of marquees. There's a full-size Dodgem ride. Singers belt out jazz standards. But fast forward to 3 a.m. and there's a queue outside Uncle Frank's kebab van. But the brilliant thing about Uncle Frank's kebabs is that even if you tip them upside down while you're drunk, nothing falls out because they're mathematical kebabs. I'm sure lots of you know this. The Chinese poet Zhu Zhivu wrote a poem at the start of the 20th century called On Leaving Cambridge that everyone in China seems to know. And so lots of Chinese people come here to look at all the landmarks mentioned in the poem. For example, every school child in China knows the lines, "Farewell, sweet Cam, your grassy banks that guided me with boundless thanks to large kebabs from Uncle Frank's." I went to the Fitzwilliam Museum. You all go to that? Right, now the thing is, because doing this show, I go to quite a lot of museums in the towns. In most towns this size, the museum has a replica of a Victorian kitchen and a stuffed badger. This is true. I went to a museum in Wales that was dark, and there was one woman behind the counter as I went in, and she said, "Are you coming in?" I said, "Yes." She said, "All right, I'll put the light on then." But the Fitzwilliam has a marble staircase and the paintings are by Matisse and David Hockney and Constable, and it's fair that the treasures of Egypt are here and not in Egypt, because Cleopatra quite liked Egypt, but Cambridge was always her spiritual home. She used to leave her chariot at Trumpington and come in on the Park and Ride. And the finest thing of all about the Fitzwilliam is that in 2006, newspapers reported that a Mr. Flynn was on the staircase. Oh, I love that he's a bit of a cult hero, Mr. Flynn. Mr. Flynn later described what happened. I don't know what he sounds like. Let's say it was this. I was trying to grab hold of something, but the walls were smooth marble, and I couldn't stop myself, and I hurtled towards a vase, knowing it would break. But though I knew the vase would break, I didn't imagine it would be loose and crash into another 2 vases. that would also break like a set of dominoes. And the vases were worth £100,000. And the museum security guard reported that as Mr. Flynn lay amongst the broken pieces, he pointed at his shoelace and said, "That's the culprit." That's so brilliantly English, isn't it? The newspaper article went on, Mr. Flynn is reported to have been temporarily banned from the museum. Temporarily for that? You'd think his picture would be on posters on every museum in Britain, like these blokes have been banned from football grounds. So this is where the Just Stop Oil people have gone wrong, isn't it? When they chuck paint over a painting in a museum, they should be more English about it and just point at the empty tin of paint and go, "That's the culprit." But there are other things as well. There's the wonderful field known as Parker's Piece that isn't part of the university, in which there is a post in the middle that is called Reality Checkpoint. The Reality Checkpoint, because that marks the end of the university grounds. And this is a wonderful piece of green, and as part of this reality, the park has its own useless Ferris wheel that no one ever goes on, and everyone in Cambridge is certain is part of a money laundering exercise. And then it disappears at the end of August, which is only fair, as I suppose another city then has the chance to not go on it either. But also, this is the field where the first nationally agreed laws of football were drawn up in 1848, and there's a statue with them written on it. And it's fascinating because it's got on there that there was a rule at that point that you could catch the ball as long as you kicked it straight away, and another rule, should a goal be awarded, the game shall cease for 37 minutes while learned men do contemplate how they can disallow it with VAR. And then from Parker's Piece, you can go up Mill Road and see the parts of the city that aren't dominated by tourists and punts and are dominated by cyclists instead. So you like the cycles then? I loved it. I'm a cyclist. I cycled round here and it was fun because there's a special rule here for when the cyclist has right of way, and it's always. And there's a rule that if you're cycling with one of those brown sidecar things, then you have to, by law, as you're turning into St Andrew Street, despite it being no entry, scream at confused Chinese people as you run them over. I bet there are cycle lanes through your kitchen here, and every few minutes a cyclist comes through, takes a biscuit out of your cupboard and goes out the back door. My right away. I liked it. I hired a bike and I thought, I hate bureaucracy, this is going to be complicated. And they just went, yeah, take it. If you run someone over, then just keep it quiet. And your most celebrated hobby is punting. And do you all go punting? No. Sort of. Not quite the same cheer you got for the vases in the Fitzwilliam Museum. I can see why, right? Because the beauty of punting is it's the most leisurely and relaxing and calming of pursuits, which is why to persuade people to while away an hour on your punt, gently easing your way around the soothing river, you need 300 students to attack you on a bridge saying, "Have you been punting yet today?" It must be strange if you live here that every time you go into the city centre you're asked if you want to go for a punt. And then, so I asked how much it was for two people and they said £76. As a method of transport, that makes it more expensive per yard than a private jet. For that I'd expect them to pump me down the M11 back to London. And then I expected another £15 to get into the boat and look at it. I went on a day, well, about the third time I tried to go on one, I went on a day that was quieter than normal, so they let me on with a child ticket that was only £25 each. And I felt like when you skip the fare on a train. My punter was this lad of about 19 called Jack, and he was brilliant. And because it looks so easy. Do you all know how to do it? Do you learn it in school here? double punting. It looks so easy, but you have to balance perfectly on the back, this way, isn't it? While stood on the end of the boat, and you have to slide the pole down to the bottom and then push so the boat goes forward while moving your hands back up the pole. Otherwise, you'd either lose the pole or fall in. It's so much harder than Formula One. And while he was doing this, Jack had to tell us stuff about the Bridge of Sighs, named by Queen Victoria, who thought it looked like the Bridge of Sighs in Venice, even though she'd never been to Venice and looks nothing like it. Lewis Hamilton doesn't have to do that, does he? But it was a great trip. Jack told us all about the Erasmus building, built by Basil Spence, considered so ugly that they didn't invite him to the opening. And we went past the Gibbs building of King's College that looks like the White House in Washington. And he told us he went past one day and asked an American in his punt if he could guess which building in America the Gibbs building resembled. And he said the Empire State Building. But punting isn't as calming as you think, because it used to be organised by a collective called the Trinity Boys, and then a company called Scudamores moved in, and the Trinity Boys denounced them as global capitalists. But then a couple bought a tree from India and made 6 punts out of it and started competing with all of them, but the couple got divorced and went to war with each other. And then Nick of the Trinity Boys had stink bombs thrown at him, and the council had to intervene. Then a company called Rutherford's moved in, and according to The Guardian, Sam Matthews of the punting company said they're trying to get rid of us after 2 of his boats were sawn in half from top to bottom. And apparently the damage to the boats was worth £10,000, which it would have taken 3 rides to make that back. Who'd have thought that punting in Cambridge was the global centre of modern organised crime? Let's set out the rules here. No one eats the swans except the master. He's a meat guy. Did the swan's head get put in the owner's bed? And the article then goes on to say another trick played by a punting company on its rival was washing up liquid was squirted on the opponent's punt to make it too slippery for the punter to stand. So punting here is a cross between living in the Bronx and being on Gladiators. And then there was an accusation that steps were being taken out of the moorings at certain points to make it unsafe to walk onto the punt. Now, I know it seems I'm going on about this a bit much, but it's hard to overstate how mad it is that the next time you see a documentary about rival gangs in the slums of Brazil, you can go, oh, that's just like the punting in Cambridge. Another of your beautiful objects that isn't tied to the university is the Jesus Green Lido, which... Are you all fans of that? Yes. It's delightful. I mean, it's so typical of a city that's sure of itself, isn't it? To call an area Jesus. Like other places have a St John's or a St Luke's. Even Rome only has a St Peter's. But only the best is good enough for Cambridge. No, we're going straight to the top. We're calling it Jesus. And the Lido is glorious, and it's 100 yards long. Olympic one is 50, but this is 100. It makes it the longest swimming pool in Britain, and it's not heated, so it's for that sort of swimmer, the ones that go, oh, every one of my organs frozen. I was in a coma for a month. It was so invigorating. It's a magnificent structure. It was built in 1923, and something else that makes it unique is that touts from a rival swimming pool often pull the plug out and saw the diving board in half. There's a lot that makes Cambridge fascinating beyond the university. Rupert Brooke, the poet, lived at the old vicarage in Grantchester, which was then bought by Geoffrey Archer, the Conservative chairman, who was jailed for perjury. You've got so much to be proud of. And there's the Museum of Cambridge, which used to be a pub, and it's now full of exhibits from the town. There's a room where there was a weekly contest to see who could tell the best lie, and the winner was awarded a liar's medal, which was bad luck, wasn't it, for anyone competing in that? What chance did they have when Geoffrey Archer lived there? So, I would like to speak to Alex. Can we find Alex? Oh, hello, Alex. So, we had a lovely day wandering around your beautiful museum.
Yeah, we did. It was a fun tour.
What's your favourite thing in there?
One of my favourite objects is a very nice toilet that we have. We have a beautiful porcelain toilet, and it said that it's the same, it's not the same, but it said it's the same type of toilet that Charles Darwin would have used.
It's the sort of toilet Charles Darwin would have used.
Yeah.
Oh, you've sneaked that one in, haven't you? If he lived in Cambridge, which he didn't.
He probably would have used that toilet.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly where he would have sat when he was doing his sketches of finches. Now, there's quite a few things. You've got pictures there of a huge meal had, wasn't there, on the Queen Victoria's...
For Queen Victoria's coronation, the town had 4 weeks to put together a huge feast. And in actual fact, they fed 15,000 people on Parker's Piece. But the best thing is they actually sold 25,000 tickets to watch the feast happen on Parker's Piece.
So that was the wealthy people. I had no idea the poor knew how to eat. Thank you very much, Alex. We will come back to you in a bit, because you know all sorts of things. There clearly is quite a conflict between the residents of Cambridge about the beauty of the city. There's a book here, Tips for Cambridge, that says if you go to the King's College Carol service, if you close your eyes while listening to the choir on Christmas Day, you will be transported to heaven. But then one of the comments underneath that says, streets and pavements are filthy, drains blocked with unswept leaves, and the bin that isn't a bin under the Alan Turing plaque is a low point. And I couldn't help think how Cambridge that was. In most towns, the piles of rubbish around the back of Aldi, and here it's under an Alan Turing plaque. Being a scientist who decoded German messages in the war, hounded for being gay and played by Benedict Cumberbatch is the minimum you need in Cambridge before you get a bin put underneath your plaque. And there are normal bits of Cambridge that I'm sure you spend lots of your time in. There are areas such as Arbury, in which the book Real Cambridge says, I told a friend I was going there and he said, be careful, that's so rough they can only read Proust in translation. Now, there's a phrase that is used to describe the tensions of Cambridge, which is town versus gown, that there are two separate places in the same place, but neither could exist without the other. For example, the south of Cambridge is now called Silicon Fen because of all the high-tech companies who have moved there, such as AstraZeneca, who became famous when they made the COVID vaccine. And what an irony that is. You must have been banging on their door going, stop! What are you doing? This is the only time we've ever been able to walk over a bridge without getting crushed. Turn your machines off. Stop! But it's also because of all these science companies that you're getting a new station, Cambridge South, for all the people who work in the new places. Because the city didn't need a station near the town when it was just normal scum that might use it. But you can't expect important science people to walk all that way when they've got all those microscopes to look through. But the reason the original station is so far away is because, according to the history of Cambridge, they did not want the station near its academic quarter. It feared the railway would be too noisy and distracting for its scholars. The book Eccentric Cambridge says the university objected to the railway because the uneducated would come to Cambridge. Isn't the whole point of a university that you take people who are uneducated and educate them? Isn't that what it's meant to do? It's like a car wash saying, we're not having that car coming in here, it's filthy. There is a little joke at the station because there's a sign on the platform that says, welcome to Cambridge, home of Anglia Ruskin University. The normal university, that's also called the Cambridge College of Arts and Technology. Pink Floyd went to that college. And Pink Floyd is so much a Cambridge band. Wish You Were Here was a message to the railway company about where the station should be. And Money is a protest song about the cost of riding in a punt. It's such a strange place, isn't it? But it raises the question of where you are. Now, how many people here would say that you're in East Anglia? Yeah. You would? It wouldn't fit the image, you know. I can't do. On the films publicised in the university, those little things they put out, they don't have anyone going, so when particles appear as waves, according to the laws of quantum physics, that's a rum old do. I had a mate who was from a village near here, this is true, honestly, and he told me his mum called one day and said, did you see our village was in the newspaper? And he said, no, Mum, I didn't see that. She said, oh, yeah, we were in the newspaper, our village. He said, what for? She said, well, they'd done a survey. It turns out our village is the most inbred village in Britain. How about that? Would you say you're part of the Fens? No. No, this is a big question. People have debated this. So I want to ask Alex here something. Have you got anything in the museum from the Fens?
Yeah, we've got loads. One of the coolest things we have is a punt gun.
Punt gun?
A punt gun! Punts were more than just leisure craft. They were used for hunting and trade and all kinds of stuff out in the Fens. Best used for hunting fowl and geese and ducks and stuff. You would mount this ginormous shotgun on the end of a punt. You'd lay down and paddle up to a flock of birds and you'd shoot it. And the force of the gun was so high that it would just propel the boat backwards. But it could get up to 80 birds in a single shot.
Well, you need to get a lot of birds to cover the 76 quid that you'd have to pay.
The last punt fenman was recorded doing this, I think, in the 1960s, and that eventually died away.
They had punt guns up until the 1960s.
No,
everyone else just seemed to accept that here. Thank you so much, Alex. Alex, who runs a wonderful museum. The university, on the other hand, was founded by thoroughly decent souls because in 1209 some students from Oxford fled to here because a group of them had murdered someone. And Roger of Wendover wrote, after the murder, the people of Oxford demanded revenge. Hundreds of scholars fled Oxford and many settled in Cambridge. Until then, the scholars in Oxford had been immune from prosecution. And you can understand that because you can't concentrate on your studies when you know that if you murder someone, you might get arrested for it. It's nearly as off-putting as a nearby train. So they ran to different cities, and the ones who came here invited some of their old masters, and they carried on their lessons, which was the start of Cambridge University. And what this means is the university started in Cambridge as a witness protection scheme. The students used the Franciscan Church, which attracted more students until in 1291, Cambridge became officially a university town. Then in 1292, Silver Street was packed with Chinese and American tourists who were charged 15 guineas to look around the gardens. By 1261, the modern tensions had begun. There was a riot in which several people were killed, and the men from the town were all punished, some of them hanged, but the king told the courts to leave the punishment of the students to the university, who were then all let off. I wonder if this is the sort of thing that over the years started to annoy people. John Fisher founded colleges here to support the Tudors, and Henry VIII founded Trinity College during the Reformation. So idols and symbols, all of that stuff, big pretty things that Catholics like, they were removed from the colleges. And at Trinity College, the organ was removed, but the organist, a Mr. Blower, negotiated a deal in which he was kept on for 2 years as the organist, even though there was no organ. That's when trade unions had some power, wasn't it? But this is the strangest thing about the history of the university, is that it wasn't like a university, it was like a country. Until 1950, it had its own MPs. Before that, it had its own laws and its own prison called the Spinning House, which was set up mostly to imprison women. And this was because of a charter from 1561 that read, "It shall be lawful to imprison all public women suspected of evil." And this meant the university could imprison any woman who was out on her own. They didn't have to do anything except be out. And the masters justified it, like they always do, saying, well, they would distract the students, or men can be out because if it's windy, their penis acts like a propeller, and women don't have one, so they'd blow into a tree. And well into the 1800s, hundreds of women were picked off the street by university proctors and put into the spinning house. The normal police couldn't do this, only university police. And the Cambridge Chronicle said we should continue to allow the removal of suspicious women from our streets as the university brings £200,000 a year into our town. There was a Professor Sedgwick of Trinity College who referred to any woman out at any time on her own in Cambridge as a nasty forward minx. The rule was that even in the daytime, women must always wear gloves and a hat in the town and not be allowed to ride or cycle in the main street or take a boat unless accompanied by a chaperone. So I'm very, very pleased to introduce someone here who wrote this very brilliant book called The Spinning House about exactly all this. Caroline Biggs. Hello, Caroline.
Hello.
When did you first hear about all this?
Actually, at the Museum of Cambridge. I used to be a trustee and I was chatting to another trustee and we thought, this is a funny old story. We want to know more. And I was really shocked and really angry when I found out how the women were treated.
No, absolutely. There is one other question I should ask you very early on, actually, which is, did you come here on your own?
It's the going home I'm worried about.
There was one woman in particular, Emma Kemp, that you write about. It was her case that seemed to start to change everything.
Yes, because she was wholly innocent. She'd been invited by a gownsman to go to a ball in Great Shelford. The proctors got wind of this because some catty girl wrote to a proctor and said, oh, there's a party going on and they're all going to be taken by an omnibus at 6 o'clock from Parker's Piece. So the police and the proctors all arrived there and they arrested 7 women and they sent the undergraduates back to their colleges. And this girl was imprisoned for 3 weeks.
Oh, I haven't got this, because every time I think about this, I think, have I got it wrong? So they were like a separate state, the university, with their own police force, their own prison.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Their own laws. Because most of the town had to abide by the law of the land and the laws of the university, which, funnily enough, actually benefited the gown and not the town.
Who'd have thought it would turn out like that? Why is this not a better-known story?
I really don't know, actually. I really don't know. Sometimes I'd mention it to people and they didn't actually believe me, which was a bit annoying. And a great incentive to write the book, actually.
When was the law changed?
In 1894, the last girl was arrested. There was an act of parliament which actually stopped it, so that the university then didn't have the right anymore to arrest women suspected only, of evil. That was the term they used. But obviously it meant something else, really. And once you've been inside the spinning house, hey, you must have done something wrong. There was something suspicious about you. So you could actually then find it really hard to get employment. So you may well then have to end up being on the streets.
Thank you so much, and thanks for writing that brilliant book as well, a Cambridge book, The Spinning House, Caroline Biggs. At the time, the university had its MPs and its own little states. Women weren't allowed to take a degree course here until 1947. They weren't allowed to use the library. When the law changed to allow women to study here, some of the colleges held a funeral for the death of education. Magdalen College did even better, only agreeing to allow women to sit for degrees in 1988. So Cambridge University is very proud, quite rightly, of having been the inspiration for some of the most prominent people in history, but they're not given enough credit for being the inspiration for Osama bin Laden and the Taliban. Everything here is part of history. Francis Crick, the scientist, announced in the Eagle pub that he and James Watson had discovered how DNA worked. And imagine that in a normal town, in a normal pub. And before the meat raffle, we have an announcement from Francis and James, who I'm sure you all know, and they'd like to tell you that we're all made of twisted ladders. And once they've done that, first up, a pack of 5 lamb chops. And they like to let you know about it in the Eagle pub, don't they? There's a plaque outside and a big notice inside and leaflets all over the pub about it on the bar. And there's a bitter called DNA Bitter. But that's quite right, because this discovery meant 50 years later, Jeremy Kyle could tell you whether Terry the van driver really was the father or not. And then there are all the pranks that are famous here, that of course have been worked out brilliantly by geniuses. There was the report in 1958 that the people of Cambridge woke up to a car on the roof of the Senate House. It turned out to be a complicated and brilliant prank by university students, and the university was left completely bemused. And then in 2024 they carried out an even more baffling stunt when someone was spotted on the Ferris wheel. There was the amazing William Horace de Vere Cole, who in 1919 sent a telegram to the mayor saying the Sultan of Zanzibar was arriving later that day at the station. And then he and his mates got dressed up and came on the train and were taken out all day, and he spoke only in a made-up language that his mate said was Zanzibarian. And amazingly, he kept doing tricks like this until 1965, when the mayor received a letter that the Shah of Iran was coming to Cambridge Airport. And so lots of officials said, I'm not falling for this again, but it was the real Shah of Iran. It's like everything here is a student prank. There were 2 students from Churchill College in 2006 who were convicted of sending a hamster through the post. And the hamster was then given its own cage with a really big wheel, but it never once went on it. There's a community in Cambridge called Night Climbers who just climb up all the old towers at night. The book Night Climbers, put it there in case anyone thinks I'm making it up, the book Night Climbers says, you will seldom see them. As furtively as the bats of twilight, they shun the eyes of the world, as out of the darkness they come. And there's a book that's a manual for climbers, and it advises which sort of rope to use for which tower and in which buildings it's possible to bribe a porter to let you sneak through. And I expect the porter to say, as it's 2 a.m. and we're not busy, I'll let you off with a child's bribe. And it's young here and it's diverse here, and if there is a St George's flag up a post, it's because Henry VIII used to live there or the Duke of Cambridge is at home. You've had geniuses who have worked out that a particle can be in 2 places at the same time, and that's why they were able to discover it here, because Cambridge is 2 places at the same time. Town down. There's Trinity and King's and places that are 15 quid to look at, and a parallel world that goes to the cafes down Mill Road and goes to Screwfix and Kettle's Yard, and as a treat goes to Fitzbilly's and sees the queues too long, so goes somewhere else and says it's amazing living in a place that millions of people round the world want to come and see, which is why we're going away for all of August to be out the bastard's way. And so many poets and writers have come through here, Lord Byron and Rupert Brooke and Sylvia Plath and Pink Floyd. So I will leave you, Cambridge, with the historic words of William Wordsworth, who used his wonderful poetic senses to describe the city that he came to love so dearly with these words. Thank you very much. Let bold, majestic views from towers soothe your soul within, of rubbish spreading outwards from a bin that's not a bin. Let holy vases glow serenely, flushed with poise and grace, until they all get splattered when some knob won't tie his lace. Let the gentle Cam dispatch its ripples from a punt. Let rival touts call out, I've sawn your boat from back to front. Let's proclaim a day in Cambridge never could be finer. Let the library be nowhere close to a vagina. Thank you very much.